Hi, and welcome back to this Free-for-All Friday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And you are aware, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, the way in which the American Family Association has been demonized in training that has taken place on military bases. Now, we've known this for some time. We talked with you about the fact the American Family Association, FRC, were singled out at training that was done at Fort Campbell by Lieutenant Colonel Jack Rich, identifying AFA, FRC as hate groups. That kind of went subterranean for a time. Then Todd Starnes reported on a story from Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Soldier called me about the training. Then he called Todd Starnes. And Camp Shelby had demonized the American Family Association, linking us with Fred Phelps of the Westboro Baptist Church. Interesting. And by the way, that Fred Phelps contingent, those guys are Democrats. A lot of people don't know that, but they are registered Democrats. They love Barack Obama, and they hate the Tea Party. I mean, that's who the Fred Phelps gang is. John Hawkins on Right Wing News ran that this week. So anyway, they tried to link us with Fred Phelps, who actually does believe that God hates homosexuals, only he doesn't call them homosexuals, calls them the F word. We don't believe that. We believe God loves homosexuals. We love homosexuals. We don't hate anybody. We love homosexuals enough to warn them about the risks and consequences of homosexual behavior. But that's where all this is coming from, is we have been tagged as a hate group in training done on military bases simply because we disagree with the Southern Poverty Law Center about normalizing homosexuality and normalizing same-sex marriage. We oppose the normalization of homosexuality. We oppose same-sex marriage. And ladies and gentlemen, disagreement is not hate. I mean, that's something we need to learn, live, and love. Disagreement is not hate. I can have plenty of disagreements with people that I love and that I care for. Disagreement is not hate. Disagreement is just disagreement. That's where you have discussion and dialogue and all that sort of thing. But this has been done. Now, we have stood up against this mischaracterization of AFA at Camp Shelby, and the military issued a press release almost right away saying, look, the information tagging AFA as a hate group is incorrect. And they said, we consider this matter closed. They didn't want any more discussion. Then I get a call from the wife of an airman at Fort Hood. She also calls Todd Starnes and says, look, it's being done at Fort Hood. Pre-deployment, AFA is being identified by a counterintelligence agent as an interior threat. American Family Association as a threat to our domestic internal security. So it turns out that contrary to what the military wanted us to believe, this is not a one-off. This Camp Shelby instructor was not some kind of rogue guy that was just rooting around on the internet and found this stuff. This is something which is systemic. It's systematic throughout the entire military. And the use of materials from the Southern Poverty Law Center, it's found in a 600-page training manual that equal opportunity trainers in the military use. So we have to ask the question, where is this coming from? What's the source of this? Where's the military getting the idea that the SPLC is a credible source of information? Military trying to say, hey, we've never published a list like this. We don't have any published list of hate groups. That is true, technically, but the SPLC does have a published list, and the military is sending their trainers to the list that is published by the SPLC. And to help us sort through some of this, I want to welcome to our Focal Point studio, Pat Vaughn. He is the general counsel here at the American Family Association. Pat, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Well, Pat, you sent an email around to us, our leadership team this morning, that to me was just sort of, you talk about the smoking gun, about where some of where this thing kind of starts with the tagging of AFA as a hate group and which government agencies, websites, and so forth are behind it.
Well, I did, and I simply Googled the FBI and the Department of Justice to look and see what they had to. If you inquire on their website about the Southern Poverty Law Center, what do you come up with? And I found many references where they are used to identify who extremists are, who become terrorist threats. After I sent that out, I continued to look when you told me I was going to come on today, and I found it's not just the FBI, it's not just the Department of Justice.
Well, let me back up just a second, Pat, because I want to start there.
Okay.
Let's start there with the Department of Justice and the FBI. Now, it's worse than that, but I mean, to me, that's alarming.
It is alarming.
that you've got the Department of Justice tagging people who simply disagree with others about gay marriage as hate groups.
Well, and it's interesting because if the government was going to actually go out and label us a hate group under the Constitution with equal protection of the law and due process, they'd have to charge us with something and prove it. What they have done here is they've tapped a private entity and given them credibility. It turns out not only have they given that information to the military, we've seen it in the Army. I'm sure we'll find it as we look in the other branches of service. But they've also done it with state police and police forces all across the nation. So anyone who is a pro-life Christian who believes that homosexuality is a sin has been labeled as an extremist. Particularly, AFA has been singled out.
And Pat, you were telling me that this is, you went on these websites, you went on Department of Justice, you went on FBI. I think you said you went on this morning.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you saw. So this is not like old information. This is sitting on their websites right now as you and I are talking here.
And as I went on further, then I began looking at Homeland Security. There is and in looking at this, you realize, wow, I knew that there was a Department of Justice. I knew there was an FBI. And I also knew there was FEMA and Homeland Security. There is a Homeland Security Advisory Council. Homeland Security Advisory Council has working groups on violent extremism. And that's made up of police and governors. And it just happens to have 2 members of the Southern Poverty Law Center on this Homeland Security Advisory Council. And what they call us is extremist groups. And they link us in with the Ku Klux Klan.
Now, and so you're talking here about Department of Justice, you're talking about FBI, now you're talking about Homeland Security. And
their advisory council.
Yeah, and the Southern Poverty Law Center is on their advisory council.
2 members. And everybody else is a governor or a state police captain.
Now, this is a statement from the military in the wake of the Fort Hood thing, and this is what I'll get your reaction to. This is from the Secretary of the Army. So this is the top guy in the Army. His name is John McHugh. He says this: on several occasions over the past few months, media accounts have highlighted instances of Army instructors supplementing programs of instruction and including information or material that is inaccurate, objectionable, and otherwise inconsistent with current Army policy. And then they've directed all Army leaders to cease these briefings, command presentations, or training. So that's good. I mean, they're stopping this horrendous defamation of AFA. But it seems to me this is
much more systemic than that.
Yes. I mean, they're trying to say this is rogue stuff. This happens occasionally. But what I'm hearing from you, no, it's on the Department of Justice website. It's on the FBI website. And it's training that's being done by the Department of Homeland Security using people from the SPLC.
Yes, and it seems like, I'm not sure whether the root is in the Department of Justice or in the Department of Homeland Security. Judicial Watch sent out a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request, and they got a chain of emails from a diversity training that was held in Washington, D.C. last fall. Turns out the Department of Justice brought in Morris Dees, the head of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he was going to train them on hate groups to identify who the hate groups are. So this is pervasive, but the chain of emails showed how intimate Southern Poverty Law is with the government. Turns out they picked him up at the airport. They asked him what he preferred to go, he preferred to go out for supper. And let me read this to you. I will pick you up at the airport, the Department of Justice employee, and it gives his name here, wrote to him in an email. Would you like to go out to dinner with my wife and me and our 2 teenage daughters that first night? The girls need some inspiration from a master of inspiration.
Oh, man.
Talk about
wow.
having a crony relationship.
So they're not just collaborating. I mean, they're like buds.
Right. Right. So this is how close the Department of Justice has drawn a group that labels Christians. If you believe in end times, that there's going to be if you believe in the Book of Revelation, if you believe that homosexuality is a sin, you are an extremist and need to be watched.
Now, one last comment. We got a couple minutes left, Pat. I want to read again part of John McHugh's statement just from this week. The groups identified in the instruction were not extremist organizations, as that term is defined in Army regulation. None of these slides were produced by the Army. The Army does not maintain or publish a list of organizations considered extremist. And my point, and this is what I want you to talk about, it seems to me that he's trying to finesse this. Well, maybe this isn't an Army list, but they are directing you to the SPLC, which does maintain that list.
Right. I went to the SPLC website minutes before coming over here, and if you pull up their intelligence files, a database of prominent extremists and extremist organizations, and they have a poster boy there. You recognize him?
Yeah, that's a familiar face. Your congenial, convivial, and amiable host.
And they go in and they talk about us as being an extremist organization, a hate group, because we combat the homosexual agenda. And they say, they identify, that's what it is. It's not that we don't burn crosses, we don't terrorize anybody, but we do say homosexuality is sin, and that people that are in bondage to that can find liberty through Christ.
Our guest has been Pat Vaughn, General Counsel here at the American Family Association, making it clear that this demonizing of American Family Association goes deep and high in our United States government, goes to the website of the Department of Justice, FBI, Homeland Security, bosom buddies with the SPLC. And Pat, we're taking legal action. We don't have time to talk about that, but we are going to pursue this until we get satisfaction.
We're going to root it out.
Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be right back after these brief messages. Stay with us. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher on AFR Talk. We'll be right back.